My sister slammed the door so hard it shattered the glass. And the next thing I remember was blood pooling under my head. The doctor said I was lucky to even wake up. But when I opened my eyes, I didn't see concern on my parents' faces. I saw fear. And then my mom whispered, "Maria, you need to forget what happened. For everyone's sake." Lying in that hospital bed, I felt pain, but what hurt more was the betrayal. My own family wanted to bury the truth. Dad leaned in, voice cold. "Don't make this bigger than it is. You tripped. That's what you'll tell people." My stomach twisted. Tripped? My sister nearly killed me and they wanted me to lie? I asked for my phone. They said it was lost. My bag? Thrown away. Everything felt like a setup. Then the nurse walked in with the x-rays, and her eyes told a different story. She glanced at me, then at my parents, and said quietly, "We need to talk. Alone." The room froze. My dad's jaw clenched. My mom forced a smile. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. They weren't just hiding an accident. They were hiding something much bigger. And then the nurse whispered something in my ear that made my blood run cold. I gripped the bedsheet as the nurse leaned close and said, "Maria, these injuries, they don't look like a fall. Someone hit you. Hard." My heart sank. I knew it. But before I could respond, my mom snapped, "We'll handle it." Her voice was sharp, almost threatening. The nurse ignored her and handed me a folded paper. "If you need help, call this number. Don't trust anyone." She left without another word, and my parents' smiles vanished instantly. Dad hissed through clenched teeth, "Whatever she told you, forget it. If you say a word, you'll regret it." I wanted to scream, to tell them I wasn't afraid. But then I remembered the way they hid my phone. My sister stood in the corner, arms crossed, smirking like this was some kind of game. She finally spoke. "Don't be dramatic, Maria. You're fine." Fine? My head throbbed, and I could still taste blood. I clenched my fists, feeling powerless. That's when the doctor entered with the x-rays. He pinned them to the light board and stared for a long time before saying, "This wasn't just blunt force. Something else happened here." My mom stepped forward quickly. "Doctor, we don't need to overcomplicate." But he cut her off, his tone serious. "Mrs. Johnson, these results, they suggest something that can't be explained by an accident." The silence in the room was so heavy I could hear my own heartbeat. My parents looked like they'd just seen a ghost. And in that moment, I realized they were more terrified than I was. But why? Then the doctor said 6 words that made my mom collapse to the floor. The doctor's voice was steady, but his words sliced through the air like a blade. "These injuries match a car accident." My breath caught. A car accident? I hadn't been near a car. I was in the living room when the glass shattered, when my sister's rage sent me crashing to the floor. But if the x-rays showed impact from a vehicle, then someone was lying. Badly. Mom's knees buckled as she gripped the chair for support. Dad's face turned pale, his eyes darting to my sister like he wanted to strangle her. What are you saying, doctor?" he stammered. The doctor crossed his arms. "Maria has internal bruising and fractures that only occur under extreme force, like being hit at high speed. Someone should explain how that happened." My sister froze. Her smug grin evaporated, replaced by panic. That's not true." "She tripped." The doctor raised an eyebrow. "Tripped? Onto a speeding car?" His sarcasm was like gasoline on fire. I watched my family unravel, each second revealing cracks I never knew existed. Then it hit me. Why my parents wanted me silent. Why they stole my phone. Why they treated me like a problem instead of a victim. This wasn't an accident. It was a cover-up. But covering up what? My dad moved fast, grabbing the x-rays from the light board and stuffing them into his briefcase. "That's enough," he barked. "Maria, we're going home." I opened my mouth to argue, but then my sister whispered something under her breath that made my blood freeze. "You weren't supposed to wake up." The room spun, my pulse pounding. This wasn't about an accident. It was about silencing me. Then the door burst open. A police officer walked in with the nurse who had warned me. Her voice was sharp. "Officer, this is the patient I told you about." Mom went pale. "What is this?" The officer raised a hand. "We got an anonymous report about foul play. We need to hear her side." Dad stepped forward. "She's in no condition to talk. We're taking her home." The officer's voice was firm. "No one leaves until I speak to Maria." My throat felt dry, but I forced the words out. I was in our living room when my sister lost her temper. She slammed the door and "Lies!" my sister screamed, stepping forward. Her voice cracked with panic. "She's making this up. She fell." The officer cut her off. "Then explain this." He pointed at the x-rays the doctor had quietly retrieved from my dad's briefcase. "These injuries don't match a fall. They match a high-speed collision. So unless she fell onto a moving car inside your house, someone here isn't telling the truth." The room erupted into chaos. My mom started crying, begging the officer to just let us handle this as a family. Dad snapped, "We're done talking. Maria's coming with us." He reached for my arm, and that's when the officer grabbed his wrist. "Sir, if you touch her again, I'll cuff you right here." The tension was electric. My dad froze, his mask of control cracking for the first time. And then the nurse dropped the real bomb. She stepped closer and said, "The anonymous report came with security footage from your own driveway." My heart stopped. Driveway? I hadn't been outside that night, or at least I didn't think I had. The officer pulled out his tablet and hit play. The video loaded slowly, but when it did, my world tilted on its axis. There I was, lying motionless on the driveway under the beam of headlights. My sister was behind the wheel of Mom's car, her face twisted in shock. And behind her, in the shadows, was my dad, waving frantically for her to back up and drag me inside. I couldn't breathe. My parents weren't just hiding an accident. They staged everything. My own family tried to cover up that my sister hit me with a car. The officer looked up from the screen, his voice low and steady. "This isn't an accident. This is attempted murder." My sister burst into tears, sobbing, "It was Dad's idea. He said no one could know." My mom clapped a hand over her mouth, screaming her name, but it was too late. The truth was out, and as the officer reached for his handcuffs, my dad did something I'll never forget. He bolted for the door, but he didn't get far. 2 officers blocked the exit. A detective slapped a folder against his chest. "Robert Johnson, you're under arrest for obstruction, evidence tampering, and conspiracy." Dad snarled, "You don't know who you're messing with." The detective tightened the cuffs. "Funny. That's what they all say." Mom dropped to her knees, sobbing, while the officer turned to my sister. "Amelia Johnson, you're under arrest for attempted murder." She broke down, screaming, "I didn't mean to. Dad told me to scare her, not..." Too late. The perfect family facade shattered in seconds. I sat there in silence, my head spinning. Hours ago, I thought my biggest problem was surviving an accident. Now I knew the truth. My family tried to kill me because they were desperate to keep a secret. But what secret? The detective must have read my mind because he said, "Maria, we have reason to believe this wasn't just about you. Your father is under investigation for massive financial fraud. The car wasn't about rage. It was about keeping you from talking." My stomach flipped. Suddenly, it all made sense. A few weeks ago, Dad asked me to sign some documents for his business. I refused because they looked shady. That was the trigger. They thought if I was gone, the problem would disappear. As my parents were dragged out, my mom turned to me with mascara streaming down her face and whispered, "You ruined us." I looked her dead in the eye and said, "No, Mom. You ruined yourself the day you chose greed over family." The hospital room fell silent, except for the sound of their chains clinking as they disappeared down the hall. I felt a tear slip down my cheek. Not for them, but for the girl I used to be. The one who believed family meant safety. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I was stronger, and I wasn't done. With my parents gone and investigators digging into my dad's empire, all his assets froze overnight. Guess who the court-appointed executor of his estate was? Me. 2 months later, I walked into that courtroom with my head held high. My parents sat behind bars. My sister was facing years in prison. And me? I signed the papers that gave me control of everything they tried to destroy me for. The reporters swarmed me outside, shouting questions. "Maria, what will you do with your father's fortune?" I smiled, calm and steady, and said, "I'll do what they never could. Use it to build something honest." The cameras flashed, and in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Justice wasn't just served, it was carved into stone. And as I walked away, the weight lifted off my shoulders. Because I finally understood. Family isn't the people who share your blood. It's the people who would never shed it to save themselves. They tried to silence me. They tried to bury me. But all they did was plant a seed, and now I'm unstoppable.